Smoke Fumes, Episode 1, Oil on Notice, Evidence of Early Industry Awareness of Climate Risks. The potential link between fossil fuel combustion and atmospheric temperature increase has been widely discussed in scientific literature and academic texts relevant to the oil industry for more than a century. The Earth receives a constant stream of radiant energy from the sun. This solar radiation is critical to maintaining planetary temperatures at a level that will support life. It has been equally critical to life and to a stable human civilization that a significant portion of the radiation the Earth receives from the sun is reflected back into space, thus ensuring that planetary temperatures do not increase uncontrollably. Beginning with the work of John Tyndall in 1859, it has been widely recognized that certain greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, make the Earth's atmosphere more opaque to that reflected radiation, trapping energy that would otherwise be released back into space. At the same time, scientists and industry experts alike have long recognized the simple and irrefutable fact that the combustion of fossil fuels, including coal, oil, and natural gas, releases tremendous amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And that indeed, carbon dioxide is by far the largest waste stream from fossil fuel combustion processes. The proportion of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has a strong positive correlation with planetary temperatures. For more than a century, this relationship between carbon dioxide and planetary temperatures has been routinely discussed in scientific literature, including specialist journals and textbooks for the geology and mineralogy communities, in the general and popular scientific press, and even in newspaper reports. For decades, however, the relationship between fossil fuel combustion, atmospheric carbon dioxide, and global temperatures caused little concern because it was widely but erroneously assumed that the carbon dioxide released in this way would be safely absorbed by the world's oceans, thus reducing global climate impacts. The situation began to change and scientific attention to carbon dioxide began to intensify in 1938 when researcher Guy Calendar published a study entitled The Artificial Production of Carbon Dioxide and Its Influence on Temperature. In this study, Calendar observed that 3/4 of the carbon dioxide released in the prior 50 years had, in fact, remained in the atmosphere. As a result, Calendar estimated world temperatures had increased at 0.005 Celsius per year for the previous 50 years. Calendar's study was not immediately embraced, but it was widely cited and debated over the following 2 decades. Some, such as Giles Slocum of the U.S. Weather Bureau, determined that they could not detect a noticeable change in atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations. Others postulated that the oceans would absorb so much of the carbon dioxide that the amount of surplus carbon dioxide from artificial coal combustion will become insignificantly small as soon as equilibrium with marine carbonate is established. In 1955, however, Hans Suess provided the first clear proof that, as hypothesized in 1896 by Svent and theorized by Callendar, carbon dioxide traceable to the combustion of fossil fuels was accumulating in the atmosphere, a phenomenon that would thereafter be referred to as the Suess effect. The research of Callendar, Slocum, Suess, and others was neither obscure nor hidden. Unsurprisingly, the earliest industry studies in which we have access that measure the buildup of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere appear around this time. Documentary evidence demonstrates oil industry was on notice of potential climate risks by 1957. In 1957, Suess and Roger Revelle of the Scripps Institute of Oceanography in La Jolla, California, published a landmark paper that contradicted the long-standing assumption that the oceans would absorb a large majority of artificial carbon dioxide added to the atmosphere. Revelle and Suess predicted large increases in atmospheric carbon dioxide, especially if fossil fuel combustion continued to increase exponentially. They noted that within a few centuries, we are returning to the atmosphere and oceans the concentrated organic carbon stored in sedimentary rocks over hundreds of millions of years. 2 months after the Revelle and Suess paper was published, scientists at Humboldt Oil, now ExxonMobil, submitted their own study for publication on the same question. Significantly, the Humboldt Oil study acknowledges not only rising levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide, but also the evident contribution of fossil fuels to that increase and the continuing and projected rise in that fossil fuel combustion. In acknowledged disagreement with Revelle, however, the paper suggests that carbon dioxide would be retained in the oceans much longer before returning to the atmosphere, which would delay the impact of fossil fuel emissions by decades or centuries. The Revelle and Suess study did not warn that climate change would definitely devastate the planet, but it did emphatically state that atmospheric carbon dioxide levels were likely to increase significantly over the following several decades. Moreover, the report provides definitive evidence that, by 1957, at least one oil company, a subsidiary of Standard Oil of New Jersey, now ExxonMobil, was aware that the byproducts of fossil fuel combustion were accumulating in the atmosphere and would likely continue to do so. An internal account of industry-funded research projects in 1958 indicates that at least one project funded by the American Petroleum Institute was measuring the proportion of atmospheric carbon of fossil origin. In other words, the Suess effect. Funded under the auspices of the American Petroleum Institute's Smoke and Fumes Committee, the research into atmospheric carbon was part of a broader research program targeting atmospheric pollutants of concern to the oil industry as a whole. This history provides clear documentary evidence that key oil and gas industry actors were collaborating in and through the American Petroleum Institute to investigate carbon dioxide as an atmospheric pollutant by no later than 1958. As discussed more fully in our next video, they were doing so within the context of a long-standing campaign to combine industry-funded science with active public relation efforts to increase public skepticism of air pollution science and regulation.